Reuters just came out with an exclusive that could really throw out and blow up the diplomatic relationship between Ukraine, China, and the United States, which indicates that Russia has a secret drone war project in China, according to intelligence sources. Now, the Chinese have been adamant that they are not going to help the Russians facilitate the war, and they're not going to provide them with what's necessary to facilitate the war. That's not exactly true, though. What they've only really hard committed against is providing weapons. What they have provided CNC machines to produce machine parts for the weapons. They have provided a big consumer base for the oil and natural exports that the Russians are putting out. So they are helping in some ways, just not directly with military equipment, just indirectly with a bunch of other sales and machine parts that's necessary for them to operate the war machine. So still essential for the war machine, but just not the one directly sending shells and such. But this exclusive report seems to indicate that that might not be exactly true. Because if the Russians are working and researching secret new drones that they're testing in China to be used in Ukraine, that means Chinese companies directly facilitating the war. Russia has established a weapons program in China to develop and produce long-range attack drones for use in the war against Ukraine, according to two sources from a European intelligence agency and documents reviewed by Reuters. IEMZ Kupol, a subsidiary of the Russian-state arms company Almaz-Antey, has developed and flight tested a new drone model called the Gripa 3. The Gripa 3, I think that says harpy. I think that's what it means. Is it translates roughly into harpy. I hope I'm accurate here, or I am a sexist and throw me in the brig. Anyway, where were we? In China, with the help of local specialists, according to one of the documents, a report from Kupol sent to the Russian Defense Ministry earlier this year outlining its work. The company told the Defense Ministry in a subsequent update that it was able to produce drones, including the G3, at a scale at a factory in China. So this is not they're testing it there and then they're bringing it. No, this means they're testing the weapons there, they're then producing the weapons there, and then exporting the weapons to Russia to then be used in Ukraine. This is the use of Chinese factories to produce weapons and test weapons and innovate with weapons at the cutting edge of the war for the Russians. This is not just a facilitation of the war, this is a facilitation of the advancement of Russia's war machine. Including at scale. So this is at scale factory production. So the weapons could be deployed in the special military operation in Ukraine, the term that Moscow uses for the war. The company and the Russian Defense Ministry did not respond to a request for comment for this article. China's foreign ministry told Reuters it was not aware of such a project, adding that Beijing had strict control measures on the export of drones or unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. Now let me tell you something. China, in my view, is quite, and now this is me speculating, but please do at least consider my speculation. China is more than happy to take the business for its drone industry. If there's anything that has been proven by this war, anything at all, it is one thing. Drones are the future of warfare. And we're not just talking about those like old style drones we saw during the war, like the later stages of the war in Iraq and, you know, the anti-insurgency effort. No, we're talking FPV drones, $700 to $1,000 drones strapped with RPGs, slam it into stuff. And if you're going to build up if Ukrainians and Russians are buying drones from the Chinese are building factories and hiring people to build the drones. And so then if they go to war or they need the drones or they want to dominate the drone market, well, they're the ones with the parts. They're the ones with the advanced drones. They're the ones with the workers that know how to make them. They're the ones with the factory and industrial production. They're the ones with the ones that have been supplying the consumer base. And so the Chinese have been selling drones to the Russians and the Ukrainians through private companies. I believe maybe even a few public companies. I'd have to double check. The public-private thing in China is it's kind of all over the place. Okay, all over the place. It's got a lot of public and private companies, so I'd have to double check. But it is providing weapons to both sides, even if it's not. I mean, it's providing these drones to both sides, even if it's not publicly stating like, "Hey, I am providing X, Y, and Z drone to Russia for war. It's still, we're providing FPV drone to Poland, knowing most likely that said drone is then going to be exported to Ukraine. I even know of instances, and I've been told this by the people who gather these drones, where these companies are taking out components that are not necessary, like, for example, a GPS tool inside of it, because it adds weight and it's not necessary if you're just going to use it for a kamikaze attack. So some of these companies are leaning into it. But now this is going further than just, well, we're not really supporting the war and then looking the other way as all these companies build up its industry through selling to both sides. This is the innovation and the production of at scale of a specific type of drone model to help the Russians. This is direct facilitation of the war out and out. The Russian Defense Ministry, we already read that. Fabian Hines, a research fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, a London-based defense think tank, said the delivery of UAVs from China to Russia, if confirmed, would be a significant development. If you look at what China is known to have delivered so far, it was mostly dual-use goods. Again, CNC machines, subcomponents, stuff like that. That could be used in weapon systems. This is what has been reported so far, but what we haven't seen, at least in open source, are documented transfers of whole weapon systems. Still, Samuel Bendant, an adjacent fellow at the Center for a New American Security, a Washington-based think tank, said Beijing would be hesitant to open itself up to international sanctions for helping Moscow's war machine. He said more information was needed to establish that China was playing host to production of Russian military drones. The White House National Security Council said it was deeply concerned by the Reuters report of the drone program, which it said appeared to be an instance of a Chinese company providing lethal assistance to U.S.-sanctioned Russian firm. Now, number one, it is true that just one Reuters report is not where the investigation should stop. More people have to go do more digging, get more documents. Some of this should be posted publicly. If not, all of this should be posted publicly, and it should be as transparent as possible to convince people that, yes, this is really happening. And this should be for two reasons. Number one, I think having more information like this available to the public is good, unless it would reveal sources in some way. But number two, this is not just a question of convincing the public or informing the public. This is going to be a question of convincing the government to act. If this report is true, not saying it is, not saying it isn't. Right now, it's just a Reuters report based on intelligence assets. But if this report is true, then it's not just a problem of convincing everyday people. It's going to be a problem of convincing the government. Not just that it's real, but that they kind of can't deny it. Because the idea of implementing the sanctions that the West would have to actually garner a response from China that would be positive towards ending this type of support, or even towards pursuing an even more aggressive policy of ending dual-use support, or even just stopping this type of stuff, the whole transfer of weapon systems. There's going to be those who are nervous about the economic impacts, certainly this close to an election. And so forcing them to act will require, I think, more evidence than just the one Reuters report. It'll probably mean that there'll have to be some digging. It probably means that somebody got this on their desk this morning and is going to be asked about, and they're going to have to look into it. But this is not the end of it. But if confirmed, this would be a massive escalation from China in the supply of weapons to Russia, which would be both the Iranians, the North Koreans, and the Chinese would be providing lethal weapons for the Russians to use against Ukraine. Ukraine's really facing down a lot, isn't it? And Ukraine's facing down basically every single American geopolitical opponent. Ukraine is 1v4, 1v4ing every single one of our geopolitical opponents. Definitely, especially if you consider the intelligence operations in Syria and in Africa. You saw the article about Russians sending Iranian tech. This is the thing. The story's not over. Here we go. It's another Reuters exclusive. Reuters is just breaking this out, okay? Reuters is just one after the other. Iran brokering talks to send advanced Russian missiles to Yemen's Houthis, sources say. Now, let me just lead with what's a little buried here. These are talks. These are conversations, which means currently the Russians have not yet made a decision. And if you guys are wondering, what could be holding the Biden administration back from the long range strikes? Most people just talk about like the waving around of the nukes. That this is another example of the West, once again, falling for Russia's red lines that are not going to happen, because if the Ukrainians can strike across the border at ground troops that are attacking into Ukraine, extending that philosophy to air bases that are being used against Ukraine and bombing, say, Ukrainian children's cancer hospitals, is not going to be what starts, you know, thermonuclear Armageddon. It does not make sense from Russia's perspective to do it. It does not make sense from the pattern of behavior we've seen from the war so far, or from what crossing these supposed red lines that are not staunchly dug into the sand, but are just vaguely dug into the sand. Like when we talk about that, it's mostly framed around that. What it isn't framed around is possible other Russian responses and through their assistance to our geopolitical opponents. So the North Koreans getting assistance with targeting or missile technology from the Russians is something that could genuinely not only damage us, but could also damage other allies of ours in the Pacific. And this could be something that they did in response to the different support that we offered Ukraine. And it's something that they already are engaging in, is a certain amount of assistance to the North Koreans. How far it's going to go when it comes to targeting and missile systems, we do not know yet, but we do know that the North Koreans are giving Russia weapons. Russia is going to reciprocate that in some way. Nothing is free. This is not a cotton candy world. My question is the threat, and I think to me the answer would probably be yes, is the threat of Russia sending these types of missiles and other technology systems to groups like the Houthis, which could then use them against merchant trading vessels that are traveling along the Gulf of Aden, scaring the West enough to stop them from approving these long-range strikes into Russia, because they want to be able to not only hold further leverage in places that they can escalate, but also not have to deal with any more problems in the Middle Eastern region, when the American government right now is already having to deal with the likely scenario of a ground invasion of southern Lebanon by the IDF. It's something that I think about and ponder on. Imagine being scared of the fucking Houthis. I mean, if the Houthis got accurate missiles, I don't know why. Like, the Houthis aren't like knuckle dragging morons to the point where they can't like operate a missile. In fact, we've seen them operate missiles. And so if they get accurate, more powerful missiles from the Russians and then use them to bomb trading vessels, that could have an impact on global prices, a real impact on global prices. And the election is 40 days away. And I hate to put this out there, but election seasons certainly do affect how world leaders act on the world stage. Biden has a little bit more flexibility since he's not running for re-election and it's Harris running. But if there was, say, a global economic catastrophe this close to the election, could be a problem. All your favorite streamers say it.